So anyway, while we're waiting, I'll say our guest is tonight is Alan Talbot, and he's an old timer with Baba. He came to Baba back in the late '60s, and he's had the great good fortune to spend a lot of time with Mandali and Baba's close ones. And thankfully, Alan has remembered many of those colorful, insightful, and humorous exchanges with Baba's close ones. And there's some of Baba's close ones we that you may not know much about. There's like Joseph Harb, who was kind of I think Alan described him as the Darwin Shaw of the West Coast. And there's Henry Kashouty, of course. But Alan and Karen have, over the years, hosted many of those who had met Baba in their home on the East Bay of San Francisco. And I think there are quite a few here who have probably been to their place and heard some of those, been there to some of those programs and concerts. But first, let's see if we have found any luck, Mayor Prasad.
Yeah, I found it. I have not heard it before, but I put a link in the chat window. Do you want?
Yeah,
Uh,
let's play it before we begin.
We repent, O God most merciful, for all our sins, for every false, unjust, or unclean thought within, for every word spoken that should not have been spoken, for every deed done that should not have been done, for deeds and words and thoughts inspired by hate or selfishness, and for lustful thoughts and actions we most especially repent, for lies and all hypocrisy and sins that only you can see, for promises given but not fulfilled, and for backbiting and slander, relieve our guilt. We repent, O God most merciful, for all our sins. We most especially repent for bringing others ruin, and for every word and deed that's given pain to them. For all these sins, we ask you to forgive us, for you are mercy, and you are here within us, and pardon us all for this debt we can't fulfill, when we think and speak and act against your holy will.
Yeah, I think I
Yeah,
did. So, Alan, the floor is yours. I would like to, I mean, if you could start out saying just a little bit of how you got caught in Baba's net. But then and I just, Alan is open to any questions, and you can kind of name almost any mandali member, and he'll have a story that goes with it. So go ahead, Alan.
Jay Baba, thank you, Jeff, for inviting me. And I don't know Danny Rubenstein, but I certainly pray for his well-being. I'd like to wish happy Thanksgiving to everyone there. Hi, Lisa. Some of these people have, as Jeff mentioned, have stayed at our house on numerous occasions of the guest list of 37 here. And some of them are some of my dearest friends. I'd like to say that because time is restricted, I did 4 YouTubes. I've done 4 YouTubes. The first one, my wife and I, Karen, who will be married 42 years next week, told our stories in Mehera in Sydney in 2005. And that's on the Michael LePage channel. The second YouTube I did, and the third YouTube I did were talks that I gave to the Los Angeles Baba group on Holy Foods, which was my natural food store in Berkeley, which Bob had asked me to do. And those run about 2.5 hours. The talks that Karen and I gave were about 1.25 hours. And that's also on the Michael LePage channel. Huey McDonald, the magician, was kind enough to put titles and pictures of the various people that I'm talking about on those 2 talks. And the last talk I gave was on the Robin Vogel channel a couple of years ago about my grandfather, who at the age of 80 became a Baba lover. And his story was told twice in Mandali Hall, encouraged by Bana too. And he and Eruch regarded it as one of the best and funniest stories they'd ever heard. It's a remarkable story. Even if I told it half as good as it should be, it's still a remarkable story. So if you want to hear more of my life story, which is maybe more than you wish to, you can get those YouTubes. But how I came to Baba. In 1980, I was with Kusum and Mokam Singh in Delhi, and Kusum asked me, could I tell my story of how I came to Baba? And she whittled me down to 1 minute. Now I have to tell you, I asked her for 24 hours to somehow get down to 1 minute. Nobody can get their story down to 1 minute unless it's a fairly remarkable story. So I can't do that. I can go 1.25 hours, but I won't do that either. So I'm going to give you the short version of the long version. And Dinko asked post the YouTube links. I don't know how to do that. If you go to the Michael LePage channel on YouTube, you'll get 3 of them. And if you go to the Robin Vogel channel, you get them. If you put my name in there, you'll see it. I graduated, I went to Penn State and graduated in 1968. I had started using drugs in November of 1966, so about 55 years ago, and was very good at it. I was an excellent drug taker at Penn State College, for those of you who know where that is. When they would bring new drugs in, I would be the guy that would take them and experiment. And I had a lot of seemingly ecstatic experiences, but enough to know that there was something beyond the physical. I started taking a class in Eastern philosophy, and in January of 1968, my roommates and I were busted for marijuana. That produced some backlash. In any event, I went out to Berkeley in 1968. I drove out with these people I met and ended up in Berkeley, and was kind of the vanguard for all the Penn Staters that came out there for about 1.5 months, and was pretty deeply into drugs. Our schedule was pretty loose. We had to be at what's called Provo Park, which is across the street from City Hall. I don't know what it's called legally, but that's what we called it then, at noon and at 5 or 5:30, in order to be fed by this group called the Diggers. And they would give us very mealy white rice and vegetables, and not great vegetables, but it was free. And we had to show up with a plate and a fork. And that was a pretty strict schedule. The rest of the day we had to ourselves. And I had a bunch of my Penn State friends out there. And by the end of the summer, there was only one guy who was not a Penn Stater showing up for the meals. His name was Jonathan Willis. And he was a Berkeley student staying there for the summer, and he had an apartment on Stewart Street, if you know Berkeley at all. It's a few blocks down from City Hall to the south towards Oakland. And we started hanging out there. And in those days, people put pictures and sayings on their wall. They ruined the property, in other words. So you would have pictures of Groucho Marx and Karl Marx, or John Lennon and Nikolai Lenin. It was like that. It was very eclectic. And he had some sayings on his wall, which I liked. And I said, who is this guy? It was Mayor Baba. And he said, I don't know, but I like what he says. And I said, well, do you have a picture of him? And he said, no, I don't. But if you go up to Moe's, which was a bookstore up near Telegraph, near the university, you can see there's a couple 3x5 cards, pictures of Mayor Baba at the end of a book stack. So under my busy schedule, I meandered my way up to Moe's, which is not where it presently is, but next door. And at the end of one book stack, there were two little cards. One said, don't worry, be happy. And one said, I am the Ancient One. Now, I did not look like the Don't Worry, Be Happy picture. That was from the early 60s. That was an elderly, kind of chubby, bald man. But I looked a heck of a lot like the I am the Ancient One. Even though they cut my hair after I got busted for drugs in the county jail, my hair had continued to grow and my beard was halfway down my chest. My hair would eventually get to my butt after 5 years. And I liked this guy. He looked like me and I looked like him. And it made an impression on me. Anyway, I had to go back to Pennsylvania. I'm going to cut through lots of story, which is quite interesting. And to make a long story short, in February of 1969, I was living, amazingly enough, with my parents back in the house where I grew up in since I was 6 months old. And I was in my bedroom, which they had converted to some recreational type room, watching a black and white TV. And I got very high on hashish. That was the part of the story Tom Riley would like. And I turned on this show. They had talk shows in those days. And the guy's name was Alan Douglas. He was out of Cleveland. And he wasn't as insane as some of the other ones. And when I turned the TV show on, there was a home movie of amazingly Mayor Baba as the old Mayor Baba. You know, the one that was I'm the Don't Worry, Be Happy card. And the speaker was speaking. I didn't know who the speaker was. And he was saying, obviously I caught up in the middle of the film, that Mayor Baba had been in this terrible accident in 1956. And the doctor said he could never walk again. But as you could see, he's walking quite briskly. And the movie, which you've all seen, is Mayor Baba at Guru Prasad walking down, looking at Guru Prasad from the front on the right side by himself. His gait is antalgic, which means it was back and forth like that. You know, Baba walked, but he was walking briskly. And I was quite amazed. And furthermore, I became completely sober immediately. Okay. In other words, I'd been terribly high about a minute and a half earlier, and now I was completely down. And then the film ended. I'm sitting there with the host in a three-piece suit with short hair, no beard. It was Alan Cohen. And somehow I knew that Alan Cohen had been with Leary and Albert at Harvard and Millbrook. I don't know why I knew that, but I knew that. And Alan continued to talk. And as I listened, the show was nearly over. I said to myself, I made a promise that I would move back to Berkeley. Alan said he was living in Berkeley, which was true. Become his friend and find out what had happened to him. Now, this is after Baba had dropped the body, after Alan had been in India to be there for the entombment. So this is somewhere around Baba's birthday, in and around that time, 1969. I did keep my promise. It's a long story. It should be made a movie. It's very funny and very remarkable. Jack Mormon and I arrived by car on June 15th, 1969 in Berkeley. And we got an apartment across from People's Park. Many things happened not relevant to the issue on the present. Well, I guess it is. And I started going to Baba meetings. And I remember one of the first meetings I went to was near the campus. They were all either on the campus or near the campus. Was an audio tape of Jerry Paulson, which I've only heard just one time. He was the last American to meet Mehera Baba. And it's one of the most, if not the most remarkable stories I've ever heard in my life. It made a great impression on me. In any event, I later became friends with Jerry, but that's a whole other story. Now, I was getting into natural foods and I began to make food for what was called the Arbor Cafe. The Arbor Cafe was a natural foods restaurant, for those of you who know, Berkeley on University Avenue, not too far from the campus, owned by Ed Van Buskirk and managed by Dennis Lessier. They were co-owned by Dennis Lessier, who are still friends of mine. Dennis is the caretaker up at Mehera, up in Mariposa, and Ed, of course, lives down here in Northern California. Both have been my friends for all these years. And my friend David Milton and I, he was my closest buddy, and now he's a very famous watercolorist, great artist. And I started living in a house behind the Arbor Cafe. So Ed lived there in the front bedroom. There was a bathroom. Then Dennis lived. And David and I put mattresses down in what would be the dining room. And that was our bedroom. And David and I painted the house, the 7 colors of Baba's reality. Eventually, that was quite a hoot. There's all kinds of stories there, but we'll just cut to the quick and say, we started making meals for some of the Baba people on Friday or Saturday night, what's left over from the restaurant. And people would come like Chapman or Dreyfus or Cohen, Hamilton, Mick and Ushi Hamilton, who were in the process of separating, and many other Baba people who had met Baba or just got back from Darshan. So we were the new fresh blood, David and I. All these people were enthusiastic. They had just come back from Darshan in April and May, and now we're into late July, early August, 1969. So one night we're having a party and I was done early, and amazingly, Mick Hamilton came over, and it was just he and I in what was my bedroom where we were going to serve dinner. Served as a dining room bedroom. You know, that was the whole story. And I said to Mick, the room was a square, maybe 14 by 14 or something like that, 16 by 16. And he was seated on one wall and I was seated catty corner at another wall. And I said to Mick, tell me your story of how you came to Baba. The short version. The long version goes for an hour and a half. And he's talked about it, and so has Ursula talked about it many times. But just the actual meeting of Mehera Baba. So Mick says, they walked into Mandali Hall at Meherazad. And Mick turned to his right, and Baba was there seated in his chair. And he put his arms out like this, like hug me. And Mick kissed him on both cheeks. And then he looked in his eyes. And he said, I looked into eternity. And I realized that he knew me greater than I knew myself. And then Ursula hugged Baba. Now at this time, I should tell you that Mick was extremely angry at Ursula. They were going through a separation. I didn't know the ins and outs. These were new people to me. So I didn't know the intimacies involved. Of course, now I know, but that will explain what's about to happen. Anyway, Mick said, we sat down next to where Eruch, next to Eruch, and Baba made small talk. How did you sleep? How did you eat? This kind of thing, and that. And you know, Baba was very charming and graceful in that way. And then he said to me, meaning Mick, who do you take me for? And Mick said to me, I said to Baba, I take you as the living Christ. And he said to Ursula, who do you take me for? And she literally had no idea. She says, I don't know. Now, I have to explain that what I'm about to tell you is what Mick told me, but this is not what happened. but that's all right. Mick said that Baba said to him, as you know that you are a man, and do not doubt it, because you experience it consciously at all times. So I know that I am God in human form, because I experience it consciously at all times. Now I was seated, as I said, maybe 10 feet away from Mick, my back up against the wall, with my eyes closed. And when Mick said those words, I could only explain it in this way. The train of consciousness, which had been going in the same direction outwardly forever, stopped and flipped and started going inwardly. And Baba told me who he was. He spoke the word of his avatarhood in my heart. It was only a few seconds, obviously, but it was an eternity in the knowledge of who he was, and who he continues to be. Now, what really happened was, in real life, was not that. It was that he had said that to Ursula, because she said, I don't know who you are, I don't know. But it doesn't matter how you come to Baba, whether it's on a little bit of this and a little bit of that. I did come to Baba on that. And so that was early August, I do believe, 1969. It could be late July, it could be early August, I didn't get the exact date. And so since that time, I've tried somewhat successfully to follow Baba. And I would like to speak, if I could, of a man who I called my teacher, who influenced my life. I hope Buzz and Ginger are here. Let me see if they're here. They were here earlier. I hope they stayed, and it doesn't appear that they did. That's too bad. Well, because I'm going to talk about Joseph Harb, and I need a little backdrop on this. What happened was, along with a couple other people at the Arbor Cafe, we decided to open a large-scale, what was then called natural food store, now called organic foods. And so we got some money together, and I was still living at the Arbor house. And Ed Van Buskirk had gotten married to his first wife, and I got his bedroom. That was terrific. And on his wall, one of the walls was a picture of Baba. And in late December 1969, as I was laying there wondering how in God's name we would put together this business, since none of us had any idea how to do a business, there Baba manifested from the picture and had a business meeting with me for about 80 minutes, an hour and 20 minutes. And the business meeting was as natural, or more natural, than I'm talking to you all right now. And in that business meeting, he told me that what was to be Holy Foods was, they had no name obviously at that point, would be his store, and he would be responsible for it. It was my job to do it. And he would be with me constantly at all times. And I shouldn't concern myself. It was his business, and I would just do the best I could. So I was a new Baba lover, just 4 months into it. And I didn't know what the rules were. I didn't know that God manifested and had business meetings with his disciples, or his new disciples. I didn't know anything really, but I knew that much. And furthermore, Baba told me not to tell anybody about this discussion, although I've modified that to understand during the pendency of the ownership. And so we did undertake and opened that store called Holy Foods, a compromise between Whole Foods and Holy Foods, H-O-L-Y Foods. So I always say before Whole Foods was, Holy Foods was. And I ran that for 7 years. My partners left in the process. Now, one of the people that made a great impression on me, which I again call my teacher, was Joseph Harb. I don't know how, there's 36 people here. I imagine most of you never heard of him, let alone met him. Joseph was a great seeker. He had been a member of Sufism, a preceptor, married his wife, Kari, a remarkable human being, and had met Baba in 52, 56, and 58. And he went to the men's meeting in 1954. He was one of the 20 so plus men. And if you go to the barn at Myrtle Beach, over the mantelpiece is a big photo. I was just there. We just got back from Myrtle Beach after a couple of weeks. And Joseph took that picture. Joseph took many pictures. He also moved to India. Baba gave him permission for Kari and he to move to India, to Pune in 1960. And they were there for 2 years. And if you see a lot of the home movies of Baba, you see movies of Joseph driving Baba around. And he was always in the films because he would always have his camera. He was taking pictures. I wonder what happened to all those pictures. It's wonderful, all those videos. And unfortunately for Joseph, he had bad health. And I'm telling you something that's not in the books now. On one occasion, Baba said to Mehera, but Joseph was in the hospital, take me to the hospital. Very quietly, went to the hospital, and Baba said to Joseph, I'm going to save you. You're not going to die. And Joseph recovered. But then it recurred some time later. And again, Baba asked Mehera to drive him to the hospital. And Baba said to Joseph, no, I cannot save you any longer. You have to leave, you and Kari have to leave India. And so they did. I want to say jokingly that Joseph was born a week before Baba, literally. And when he would talk to Baba, he would say, Baba, I came down a week before you to see if it was all right for you to come down. And I checked it out for you and it was okay. And Baba would laugh. He enjoyed that. So I met Joseph probably in 1970, 71. He lived in a town called Orinda, which is outside of Oakland and Berkeley, with his wife Kari in this lovely home. And the people at Holy Food, some of the guys like Ron Ormond, Mustache Ron, Eddie Hauser, Mark Murray, now going by Mark Carr, Jack Mormon, and others would go visit Joseph. Now, Joseph, this was generally on Sunday, and we would start at 9 or 10 in the morning and go to 4 or 5 in the afternoon. And Joseph would stand there and talk the entirety of the time. And every 2 hours, when he had finished whatever he was going to say, he would say to somebody, question. And then it didn't matter what the question was. He would go another 2 hours and then it would repeat itself. And we would sit there and maybe we got a bathroom break. Maybe we got a glass of water. And I used to laugh later when people would say to me, how come you never fall asleep during Val's talks? I said, Val's talks? He was like the minor league. I used to sit 6, 7 hours with Joseph Harb. And Joseph would stand. He was an old man now. Mind you, he was born in 1894. So he was at least in his late 70s, and he would stand for hours. Now, the amazing thing about Joseph was his face normally emanated light, illumined light. I had never seen a human being whose face illumined light. I mean, literally light poured from it. And when he laughed, which was most of the time, or was telling a joke, which was most of the time, even more light. And when he was pouring love out, it was the whole room was light. And it was unimaginably beautiful to be with him. And he would talk for hours about Baba, intimacies. And I remember one thing he said, and I pray I hear his voice once more before I go. You know, he said, and I could see his face as I'm saying these words, I could see Baba anytime I want. And I could talk to him anytime I want. And I thought to myself, this 23 or 4-year-old whippersnapper, well, gee, if one person can do this, then any person can do this. Maybe a mild presumptuous. But as I say, Baba had told me when I owned Holy Foods, or in that talk that he gave to me, that he would be entirely available. So I could talk to Baba all the time. I must say, I've never seen in the way that Joseph described it, Baba all the time. I've never had that direct experience, so I've had other many experiences. But that made a great impression on me. Now, Joseph would, because we love each other so much, he would shop at Holy Foods. He'd come every week or two. And I was the busiest person you could imagine. I'd work on long hours, 80-hour weeks, and I never had time. I barely knew if I ate. I never took breaks. We were very busy. I want to say in passing that we put Baba pictures up on the store windows. It was fourth largest intersection in Berkeley. And I estimate that 40 million people saw Baba's image, and 700,000 customers saw Baba's face. Paintings. We gave away 100,000 Baba cards and 30,000 highest of the high, and I got in a pill, which I got, and many, many posters and books, much of which I got from either Rick Chapman or Sufism Reoriented. It was a big store. We were the second largest natural food store in the San Francisco area, which was the headquarters of the organic food business in the United States. And, you know, there's many stories there that you can listen to in my talks. But Joseph would come in, and I told the employees, I had Baba employees too, as well as non-Baba employees, that when Joseph came in, I was not to be bothered no matter how long or what the emergency was. And I would walk around with him and shop with him, arm in arm, and he would whisper in my ear, and he would call me sweetheart and darling. I cannot describe how beautiful he was. It went directly to my heart. And we would go and look at Baba's picture. We would just talk about Baba. It was so magnificent, so magnificent. And this went on for years and years till about the last year of his life. In the last year of his life, Laurie Agan, later Laurie Bloom, now passed away, who lived in the area, began to live with Kari and Joseph because he was handicapped in that sense. And she would drive him to Holy Foods, even though he was not really able to walk as much or talk as much as he was capable of doing so. I miss that. And in a very important part of my life, it's too complicated to discuss here, but I got unionized by the retail clerks union, and was going through a very severe confusion as to why I had failed Baba, because Baba had put me in charge of his business. And so many people had seen Baba's picture, read his words. Many people became Baba people because of Holy Foods. Jeff Craddock, for one. I mean, I've heard from endless stream of people, that's where they first heard of Baba. So what Baba's work was, I can't say. I did my work, he did his work. But this is in September or middle of August 1976. And Joseph came in with Laurie had driven him, and he shopped, and again was with him. And when he was leaving, I had a sense I would never see him again, which was correct. And I said to him, my heart was breaking because I felt I had failed Baba by not doing the work properly. And so I stood on the sidewalk. He was in the car in the passenger seat. He rolled the window down, and I said, Joseph, all these years I've tried to do this work for Baba. I never told him about what I told you about Baba's directive to me, his order to me. And I don't even know if I've pleased him. I have no idea. I can see his face, excuse me. He said, sweetheart, when I'm in your store, I see Baba everywhere. He's going like this. He's utterly happy with the work you've done for him. And I started crying, as I'm trying not to do now. And tears rolled down my cheeks. I was overcome. I said, thank you, Joseph. I kissed him on both cheeks, and he kissed me on the lips. And I told him I loved him. And I told him I loved him, and he told me he loved me. He rolled the window up. And a week later, he went into a coma, and he passed away a few days after that. He has made a great impression on many of the Baba people. I want to tell one story, which is typical of Joseph. He didn't go out very much, but after a Sufi play, the Sufis would have put a play on around Baba's birthday. And after Sunday, which was the final play, Friday night, Saturday, and then Sunday, it was a big party at this facility near the Berkeley campus. And there was hundreds of people there, all the Sufis and Baba people in the Bay Area. So hundreds of people were there. And Joseph was there, which is amazing because he never went out to something like that. And I was talking to somebody, and all of a sudden I heard a lot of laughter about 40, 50 feet away. And on a platform, not very high, but on a platform, there was Joseph talking. And people didn't really see him unless you made the effort to, which I did. And I kind of shoved my way in. I was very good in getting on buses. So I used those skills to push my way through all these Baba people and Sufis. And then Joseph said something that people thought was funny, but I didn't think was funny at all because I knew the truth of it. He said, you know, he's standing there with his light pouring from his face. Only one person loves more people than I do. And somebody from the crowd said, well, who is that, Joseph? And I thought, my God, don't they know? And he said, well, Baba, of course. And everybody laughed, but I didn't laugh. I thought, but that's true. Joseph loved Baba as much as anybody. Now, I hadn't met Mehera at that point, obviously, or the mandali, although I knew some of the close ones. But I just laughed in my heart because it was true that Joseph loved Baba as much, or his people as much as anybody I'd ever met. So that, unfortunately, those of you folks on the East Coast never got a chance to meet him. Those of us in the Northern California group and maybe in Southern California, if they were fortunate, got a chance to meet him. But he died in 1976 in September. And so you'll have to go look. There are no YouTubes of him. There's no tapes that I could find. I've asked all over the Baba world if there's just one talk at Joseph's. And nobody has one, not Irwin, not Sufism, not Nashwan, not anyone. So it's all in my heart.
Hey, Alan,
Yes.
Did he kind of tell you a little bit about his practice in remembering Baba? Any like little hints or
Well,
things that
just
you got
Baba's
from
name.
him?
He just took Baba's name continuously. He was in Baba's presence at all times, you understand. He could talk to him continuously and see him continuously if he wanted. What he did, I don't know, but I mean, this is another soul, from another time. I mean, I don't think most of us could see Baba whenever we want. I don't mean looking at an external picture. I mean interiorly and speaking to him interiorly. That was the message I was getting from Joseph, and that was the inspiration that he could give me, that he was able to give me, and the others who listened carefully. It was, God love it was his, then he would laugh, call me darling and sweetheart. And God love it, that was his name. That was his kind of tag instead of, he just loved Baba continuously. There was no break in the love. I never saw him depressed or down or angry or disputatious. I only saw him as loving, kind, and sweet and heartfelt.
And you said that he said Baba's name inwardly, kind of.
He didn't have to. It was there. It was continuous. He was living in Baba's presence. That's who he was. There was no presence.
Yeah. Sounds like Darwin Shaw.
Exactly. That's what I'm trying.
Yeah.
And by the way, I should mention that Karen and I were exceedingly good friends with Darwin and Jean. We had them out at our house. In our second house, we had we created a guest room. And we had Leah Turson, Darwin, and Jean out for a week. And that was wonderful. And we were always very close to them throughout the years. But I did want to share Darwin. I want to mention, if I could, Ralph Hernandez for 1 second. Sometimes you say something to somebody and it changes their whole life. Did you know that? And I'm going to tell you what Ralph Hernandez said to me that took me over 40 years to realize how it changed my whole life.
Give a little background of Ralph Hernandez.
Ralph Hernandez was married to Stella Hernandez for over 70 years. Ralph and Stella worked at the Gateway. They were from the Tampa area. They were Cuban Americans and quite remarkable souls. But they would always sit at the meeting place. If you were on the stage on the left side at the second row, Ralph would sit on the aisle and Stella to his right. So before I was married to Karen in 1979, I would come to the center and I was by myself. And even afterwards, Ralph would say the same thing. But I want to share this because it stunned me the first time he said it to me. So I would kibitz with him because he was very funny and we just joked and laughed. And he said to me, Alan, I think of you every day. And I was taken aback. Can you imagine? I showed up the center once or twice a year for a week or two. And this man who hardly knows me said, Alan, I think of you every day. And I said, but Ralph, why waste time on me? That when you're thinking of me, think of Baba instead. And he said, no, I could squeeze you in. I think of you every day. And he would say that every time I would see him. Now, I'm a slow-witted person, apparently, because it took me about 40 years, so maybe less than 10 years ago, to realize the significance of that. And so it changed my life in this way. I would think of Baba people. Of course, when I was working, I had to work. After I sold Holy Foods, I was a lawyer and working 75, 80 hours a week, 6 days a week, almost like an automaton. But I would think of Baba people as much as I could. And when you think of a Baba person, you think of Baba. So I'm just looking at the group up here. I'm seeing Jeff's face, who I've known for 50 years. Rainey, who I've known for 40 years. And Lisa, who I've known a number of years, and she stayed at my house with her husband, Mark. And I think of these people all the time, not only because of Facebook, but I get jokes, I get music videos, I get various things, which I send out to Baba people, particularly since I've retired. And when I have an address list, A to Z. So when I start at A and I go through Z, I think of all these Baba people continuously. For each thing I send out, it's special to that person. And I can include them. So when you're thinking of Baba people, you're thinking of the love they have for Baba. You're thinking of the joy they have for Baba, the interest they have in Baba. Like if I think of Lisa, I think of the beautiful music that she and Mark did together. And or if I think of Rainey, the same thing, and the various other qualities these people have. So Ralph inadvertently and innocently, in telling me that he thought of me every day, totally changed my life. And it took me only 40 years to realize how he did it. And even though he and Stella are gone now, and I was fortunate enough to be at the memorial service a number of years ago when Ralph was died. I want to appreciate that. And it's
beautiful. Yeah.
A remarkable way of remembering Baba is to remember his lovers. If I look at the list here, I see I was in India with Marvin and Michelle. I've known Ralph Jackson for close to 50 years. Rosalie Dunphy, I knew her before. We both were Baba lovers, if you can imagine that. David Lohman, I've known for 40 years. I hope Betty's here. Betty was the heart. Yeah, Betty's there. Betty was the heart of our group. When she moved to Oregon, it collapsed our group in Northern California. She's one of the great Baba lovers in America. I say that unequivocally. I'd like to talk for a moment, if I could, about Henry
Group has not collapsed, by the way.
I'm sorry, what?
Our group has not collapsed. Sorry, Alan.
I'm teasing. It's not collapsed, maybe, of course not. But Betty leaving it was not helpful. Let's just say we had to put an extra shoulder to the wheel. I think we could all agree upon that. I'd like to talk about Henry Kashouty for a second, if I could. I assume many of you met or knew Henry Kashouty. He was from the East Coast entirely. The first time I met the Kashouties was in 1971 on my first trip to the center. And they were in those days, the twin cabin was split between a small twin I can't remember if it was A or B, and a larger twin, and they were in the large twin. And Henry seemed to like me, and Keisha seemed, who I'm still close friends with, seemed to like me immediately. I had long hair and beard. I was a hippie in Myrtle Beach, July 1971. Trust me, I stood alone, but that's a different issue. And Henry was very interesting. He would talk to you, if you knew him, from about 2 inches away. So if either of you had eaten garlic for lunch, it was a real problem. He was a close talker, you might say, and he was very powerful, very powerful. At that time, he was a judge, of course. He had been a lawyer. I was not a lawyer then. And we became close friends. And then eventually I went to law school and became a lawyer. And he would come out for various judge conferences and things like that. And I saw him at the Mehera Center. And we remained in contact. In 1980, I was studying for the bar exam, and he was the guest at the LA Savas, and he was staying in Oakland with our friends, the Wrights and the Busanages. And I remember being with him on Silence Day. I had to study all day, but I gave him a couple of hours studying for the bar exam. What a torture that was. And Henry was talking to Karen, and he said this funny thing. He said, "Baba, if it's not your will that Alan passed the bar exam, make it your will that Alan passed the bar exam."
Hey, Alan, you should mention that Henry and Keisha, they met Baba in 1956 and
I'm going to tell
58.
the story. I'm going to
Yeah.
tell.
Well,
Well,
no, yeah, just that they
Uh,
were
So
had
Henry,
met Baba.
yeah, Henry and Keisha met Baba in 56 at the Delmonico initially. And this is a sweet story because they drove up from Virginia Beach where they live. And Keisha went out shopping. They were newly married just a few years. And, but Henry was desirous of meeting Baba, notwithstanding Keisha's absence. So he went in by himself. And when he saw Baba, he whispered in his ear, "You are magnificent and I adore you. You are magnificent and I adore you." So after his time, people were shuffled out, the side door. But Henry was so desirous to see Baba that he stood behind a plant, and there was a door that would open when the people would leave. But for a brief second, you could look in and see Baba, which got Baba's attention. It was very funny until Keisha came back from shopping and found out that Henry had gone in without her. That's a whole other story, and I don't get involved in the family affairs of others. But I do know that Baba somehow managed to negotiate a peaceful settlement there. Now, here's a funny story. Years ago, when I go to the center, I would always call Henry and Keisha. I don't know why. I thought the phone was closer if I was in Myrtle Beach than if I was in the Bay Area, which makes no intellectual sense. So I'm coming back from Baba's house one day, and I called, and Keisha answered. And she's so sweet. If any of you know her, she's like a jewel. "Hi, honey." That was the way she talked. "Hi, honey. How you doing, sweetheart?" And I said, so I'm walking back to the cabins. I'm by myself. And she said, "Oh my God, I just had a memory." I said, "Roll it out." She said, "You want to hear a great story?" I said, "Absolutely." She said, "Listen to this." She said, in 1956, after we met Baba, Henry had a vacation. He was a new lawyer. We had no money. We were poor. And we said to each other, "Where should we go for vacation?" One of us said, "Let's go to the center." So they didn't know if they could go to the center. So they called Elizabeth. And they said to Elizabeth, "Elizabeth, can we come for a vacation to the center?" And Elizabeth says, "I don't know. I don't know." Because no one had ever stayed on the center before as a guest. She said, "I'm going to have to write Baba." So she did. And after she got the okay, she notified Henry and Keisha and said, "You can come on down, but you'll be by yourself on the center." So Henry's brother owned car dealerships in the Hampton Beach area, and they had just gotten a new car. It was a convertible, but unfortunately, it was not well made. So there they were driving down in a horrendous rainstorm. And Keisha said she spent the entirety of the trip with a towel wiping off the interior of the window because the heater wasn't working. They couldn't see anything. Finally, you know, and in those days, in 56, you couldn't find the center. It was a mailbox. That was it. It's not like the malls there, like today. I mean, there was nothing there. And no one had ever done this before. So needless to say, they got lost. So they finally arrived at the center, and Elizabeth had told them, when they come to the center, drive all the way through to the original kitchen. So they arrived in the original kitchen. They were tired, late, hungry, had to go to the bathroom, completely decrepit, harried, any word you want to use. They were really verstumpen. They walked in the original kitchen. Kitty was there with Laura Delavine, Ruth White, and Elizabeth. And Elizabeth said to them, "You're late." And that's what she said. And I started laughing because that would be Elizabeth. In any event, they were the first guests of the Mehera Center. And Keisha said, I asked her, how long did you stay? She said, it must have been 2 weeks or vacation. But I thought you'd get a kick out of that story. Now, Henry was very sweet. We were, as I say, we were very close. And one time I called and Keisha said, Al, I'm going to tell you something in private. Henry has a chair and he reads Bible all day on there. And on that chair, next to that chair is a table. And on that table are two pictures. One is a picture of Baba. And this is where he keeps his book and his glasses that he's going to read from. And the other picture is a picture of you and Henry and your two sons that were taken at my house. And I was so moved by that. The idea that Henry thought and loved us so much, you know, loved Karen and the whole family so much that he placed us on the most precious area. Well, Henry's gone now, and I still maintain contact with Keach. I send her Baba things and music, and she loves music, and she's 89 now, and still a gem, Baba gem. She just tells me she loves me endlessly, and what can I say about that? He gave us so much pleasure when we were talking about meeting Baba, and he was so powerful, you know. Conviction was his thing. On his desk at work, even when he was a judge, he had a picture of Baba, and people would say, how do you know he's God? And Henry would say, I don't know he's God, but he says he's God, and I believe him. That's conviction. And he had gotten that conviction inspired by Katie Irani, who was his close correspondent friend. He had had an enormous correspondence with Adi initially and over the years. So I just want to remember Henry Kashouty. In the late 70s, when I went to Myrtle Beach, I was very close friends with Kitty, and she called me in. We were maybe having lunch, I don't know. And she said, Alan, could you do me a favor? And I said, yes, of course, whatever you want. And she said, when you go back to your group, the Northern California group, because I know you're the best, I would like you to have meetings and not forget the old timers. Now, Kitty was probably 85 at this point, so she qualified as an old timer. But I gave her my word that I would do that. And in doing this talk tonight, I'm including some of the old timers. And over the years, we've had, even before we have what's now called urban salvasas, I had other guests out, even before I was married, and since I've been married to Karen. We've probably had about 10,000 people at our house over the years, I've estimated, for various mandali and close ones of all stripes and types. Some have stayed at our house in what we call urban salvasas. Some have stayed for a week, like Lisa and Mark. Some have stayed longer. Val stayed with us probably over the course of time, about a month. And so on and so forth. We've been blessed beyond imagination. And it is hard to believe that a human being can have a greater life than I've had. I really mean that. It would, I realized this a couple of years ago, that I'm utterly an imperfect person, but I lived a perfect life because Bob has laid it out for me 100%. everything that has happened has taught me, or has hoped to teach me, the elements of two facets of spirituality. One that Eruch talks about at length in one of his DVDs on self-effacement, and the other important facet, I think, of the spiritual life, which is forgiveness. And learning those two things, and I've seen that in all the mandali, and learning not to worry. I'd like to tell, if I could, a story about that I got from Katie Irani. The last time I had a long talk with her, this is a few months before she died. This is one of the most significant experiences. I was on the porch. We had just gotten to India. Karen and I would go in December for 2 or 3 weeks. And I went in on the veranda, and Katie was there. Arnavas was in the process of dying. The focus was on her. And for some reason, for about 20 minutes, nobody interrupted Katie or me. And I just sat next to her. Now, what was shocking was she had lost a lot of weight, and a good chunk of her teeth had fallen or were gone. And I didn't know what was happening. It turned out that she was going to die in 6 months, but the focus again was on Arnavas. And I sat next to her, and because she was embarrassed to open her mouth because of all the gaps in her mouth, she talked. I sat very close to her, like literally lip to lip, so to speak, just a few inches so she could whisper. And she said to me this went on for 20 minutes, but I'm giving you the summary version. She said, Alan, and we were very old and dear friends, I could see him out there. He was so beautiful. You have no idea. We would dance for him, and we would sing for him. We would frolic in the garden. He was magnificent. We loved him, and he loved us. I can't sing anymore, and I surely can't dance anymore. I could barely walk at this point. But I could see it in my eye, and I looked in her eyes, and I could see her looking at it into the garden, Mehera's garden, Mehera's eye. And he said, you people, meaning the women mandali, you have been with me all these years, and you still worry. Do you not understand this is my most important order, not to worry? There is nothing to worry about. I tell you, there is nothing to worry about. She went on this area for a while. And then she asked me personally, do you worry? And I said, no, we're not allowed to. Although I guess I do worry sometimes. But she said, that's good, because that would please him. And so this continued. And for some reason, it was like there was a dominion over us, a dome. So nobody interrupted our conversation. It was very peculiar, because she was the only mandali out on the porch. Mehera must have been in the house sick, not well that day. And then I said to her at one point, Katie, could I tell this story to other Baba people around the world? And she said, yes, that would make me happy. And so I'm sharing this story now. She was a great soul. It turned out she had Parkinson's, and she died in May of 2009. Of course, one of us passed in February of 2009. And so that was Katie Irani, my last significant talk with her. We would mostly tell jokes and laugh, but she was serious that day. And I'm happy to share that experience with you all, because it touched my heart.
Any exchanges with Eruch that come to mind that were helpful to you?
Here's a funny story. Eruch was a real yeoman. That guy I can't believe, he was the Joseph Harb of Mehera. Of course, he sat, but he would sit there day after day, month after month, year after year, really speaking the same story over and over again. Occasionally, it was the same facts, occasionally not. I always got a kick out of when someone said, but Eruch, I was here 2 weeks ago, and you tell the same story, but it was in Bangalore, and now you're saying it was in Nagpur. He said, brother, the facts are not that important. Just listen to the story. Well, I was a lawyer for a lot of years. Facts count a little bit, but it is the essence of the story that's important. I did have, as I mentioned earlier, on the urging, not on the urging, carried me into the hall, Belna too, to tell the story of my grandfather, which I tell you, if you listen to that story, Baal and Eruch regarded as one of the funniest stories. They would talk about my grandfather all the time, apparently, which boggled my mind. So I encourage you to listen. It's about 45 minutes, quite remarkable. But one day I was in the hall, and there was this young fellow. Of course, we were all young fellows in those days, weren't we? And Eruch was probably exhausted, as he might be, and he said to this man, now I can't remember his name, Joe, we'll call him Joe for the sake of the conversation. Why don't you tell how you came to Baba, the story of how you came to Baba? And the guy said, no, Eruch, I'm much too shy. And Eruch said, no, Joe, come on, tell the story. Eruch was very diplomatic. And Joe said, no, Eruch, I'm much too shy. And this went on about 5 or 6 rebounds until finally Eruch said, brother, we're killing time and illusion. Please tell your story. Got real forceful. Clearly he needed a break. So the fellow told his story. And by the way, everybody's story is fantastic. And so after Joe finished and he was getting into it, we clapped for him because it was a great story. I can remember that. In 1977, I was going to go to Kashmir, northern India. And Eruch and Monty just loved the idea I was going to go to Kashmir. So they spent about 2 weeks with me. I was there the whole summer. This is after I sold Holy Foods and before I went to law school. So I was there numerous weeks. So they spent about 2 weeks with me going over Baba's Kashmir trips and planning my trip. And it was a lot of fun to spend that much intimate time with the both of them. And interestingly enough, there was this big magazine like Our Look or Life magazine, one of those large magazines that have a lot of pictures in it. I think it was called Times of India or something like that, or Life of India. And it had a whole story in that article, in that issue, about Jesus being buried in Kashmir, near Harbon. And it was really fascinating. We discussed it, and Monty had memories, or of course wasn't there at the time. But very fascinating. And I did go to Kashmir and had the pleasure of nearly dying there and bought 2 silk rugs. That's all the story. And came back and reported into the troops because, it was like a temporary off-campus visit until I came back to the campus at Mehrabad Meherazad. And they really enjoyed and I went back in 1978. That's a whole other story. Nearly died there too, in Delhi, got heat stroke. But Kashmir, unfortunately, you can't go there anymore. I have lots of photos on our Talbot website. We have over 15,000 photos in talboido.com. If you want to see the history of the Bible from Alan Talbot's eyes, you have about 15,000 photos that we put into the website. And there's lots of Kashmir photos there. It's quite a beautiful place. It's quite remarkable. And there were some Baba people up there, but mostly there were only a few. And I did get to meet them in 1978. There were the 6 Hindus living in Kashmir, I think. It's a dual state of Jammu and Kashmir, and the Kashmiri part is Muslim, essentially Muslim. Anyway, you can't really go there anymore, which is a shame. It's quite a remarkable place.
Any exchanges with Mani and Mehera?
Well, Mehera, I'm going to tell you one of the great. Now, Mehera, my God, in 1973, my first trip. Oh, I'll even start it differently. Karen and I started going to India at Christmas, we stopped going to Myrtle Beach. And on one of those trips, Judy Robertson was given a tour of Upper Maribod. This is like 2008, let's say, or 9. And we were under a tin shed. It was Mehera Day. And Judy said, there was about 20 people there, maybe 10 guys, 10 women. And Judy said, in passing, well, you know, none of the men had tea with Mehera. And I said to myself, well, that's not true. I had tea with Mehera. So I raised my hand. I told this story at Mehera Day in around 2012. And her face was shocked. She said, you had tea with Mehera? I said, you want to hear the story? She said, absolutely. So here's the story. My first trip, 1973 to India in November, for some reason, Mehera was giving a tour of Baba's bedroom, and I got picked. And this other guy who was kind of a druggie, so he lasted about literally 2 minutes. And so I spent the next hour by myself in Baba's bedroom with Mehera. And as I said, and I've always said it about this, she went through every artifact in the bedroom. I was going to be the best audience in history. When she cried, I cried. And when she laughed, I laughed. So no matter what Mehera did, I just followed suit. And it was remarkable. Then she took me out and showed me the tree that outside her window where Baba's image was. So now it was about time for tea. And she said, would you like to have tea? And I said, what part of that don't I like? So I had tea with Mehera. And I was the guy there with about 10 women. So after I finished my little tale, we're under the tin shed at Upper Maribod, sitting there on the berm. Another guy raised his hand and said, I had tea with Mehera. And he told his story. And then the third guy raised his hand. So it's 10 guys there, and 3 of them had tea with Mehera. It was very funny. So baffled by this, we started doing some research. So I had some either talk to email correspondence with the kids at Meherazad, and we determined that somewhere around 74-5, Mehera stopped having tea with the guys, because we started asking guys what about their trips, and we were able to winning it down in that time frame. And Casey seemed to confirm it. Now, the next great thing that happened with Mehera, I became good friends with her after that, because I would sit right in front of her. And so when she laughed, I would laugh. And when she cried, I would cry. It was like a good deal from my point of view. I was rapt attention to Mehera. Now, in 1978, I was going to go back to India. This is the break between law school and the one term and the other. But I was going to get there the first day, June 15th. So 3B, Diane Cobb had a extensive correspondence with Mehera ordered by Baba. And she had this painting, which many of you have seen in one place or another, of Baba's white horse avatar on a white horse. It's really remarkable. And Murshida Deuce called me to her home and asked me if I could deliver this painting, which would be rolled up on the sticks, to Mehera. I said, absolutely. I won't get into a long story, but I did go, took Japan Airlines. It's quite a remarkable story, but to the nub of it, I flew eventually from New Delhi, where I was staying with Mokum Singh, to Aurangabad. This is kind of the humorous part. And because it was a small airport, the painting was in storage. So when they finally delivered the painting to me, and I had my suitcase and backpack, whatever else, the entire airport was black. I'm standing there literally in a dark airport by myself. There's nobody there. And I have no idea where to go or what to do. So I wander around for about 45 minutes in this airport, which is more than just an airstrip. And finally, this man comes up to me and he says, his English wasn't too good. He said, what are you doing here? Which was a reason why. I said, I'm lost. So he somehow got me a rickshaw and I got to a motel, hotel, whatever. And the next day I got a cab. And to this day, I don't know how that happened. But I said I wanted to go to Meherazad. And the cabbie from Aurangabad somehow got me to Meherazad. How in God's name this guy got me to Meherazad? But the funny part was usually the cars pull up in front of the old clinic, Goer's Gold Clinic. And they stop there. But this guy, of course, didn't know the rules. So he goes into the area in front of Mandali Hall. Dust is flying in the air. Stones are going in the air. Alaba's screaming at the top of his lungs. It's hysterical. I'm pulled out of the cab. Alaba's yelling at the cabby. The guys are taking my luggage, and the word goes to Goer, Dr. Goer, and she comes on a little bike that I'm to bring the painting to Mehera. They've been waiting for me. I am opening the pilgrim season, June 15th, 9 a.m. So I carry the painting, and Goer rides her bike back to the veranda. I hand the painting to Goer because I don't want to risk touching Mehera. The painting is handed to Mehera. This beautiful painting, which has been in the museum and elsewhere. You've seen it on the cover of the Globe and elsewhere. Been in the Globe numerous times. 3B did one of Muhammad as on a camel too. Same idea. And I spent the entire day by myself, other than eating lunch with the women Mandali. It was one of the great days of my life because you know what I realized early on, I pleased Mehera, made her happy. And if you make Mehera happy, you make Baba happy. So it was one of the greatest moments of my life. That moment when I made Mehera happy. Because she'd been waiting for this painting for months because of her close relationship with 3B, who was a sweet soul. She's gone to Baba, and both of them. But 3B went much too young. She was a great soul also. So that was one of my great experiences with Mehera. The third great thing I had with Mehera was in 1988, I couldn't have been working anymore. I worked 6 days a week. I worked till 7 in the morning till 11 at night sometimes, barely eating dinner, reading medical records. And we were in Myrtle Beach, and Kitty asked Karen if my son Matthew is now 40, if she could take him to India to meet Mehera for her birthday in 1988. And Karen said she couldn't do that because she had the other kids and Alan can take, it was, anyway. So I said, Kitty, I'll take Matt. I'll take Matt. And so I did. Matthew was a great trooper. He went to India. Rainey was there, I know, with Mehera. And Matt had a chance. He went to the play. He also played a lot of video games with Ahmed and Dean Fenster, but that's a different issue. He went to Mehera's, what would be her last play. We actually sat behind Mehera and Mani in the play. It was kind of cool. And the play was resurrected a couple of years ago. It was a story of Sheriar. I'm sure Rainey remembers it, or hopefully she does. It was quite a beautiful play. And Matthew had a chance to sing on the porch, Christmas carols, and whatever the kids know. I know Franny was there. Bunch of kids. Mehera Bloom was there, as I recall. Yeah. So it was very special. And Matt had tea with Mehera. That was very cool. Very, very cool. And he wrote a card to Mehera. And it went something in the vein of, Dear Mehera, Karen has it in the other room. We got it back. Thank you for allowing me to have tea with you. Matthew Talbot, a lucky Baba lover. A lucky Baba lover. Very, 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 very touching. I'm glad I did that. I want to say, not to make my son Matthew stick out, but he was able, Dr. Goer regarded him as her grandson for various reasons. And he was born on her birthday, and also Goer had helped Karen just facilitate getting pregnant. I helped a bit too, I guess. But that relationship between Goer and my son Matthew was so beautiful. The way she, her soft-handed stroke his face. I remember showing up at the trust compound and bringing Matthew in, and his meeting everyone because they knew we were coming after the report ahead of time. And going into the back where Eruch's little office was outside, he had a desk and he worked out back. And Eruch hugged me. And then Matthew, who we had never seen before, Matthew hugged his right leg and held him like they were best friends. And Eruch just held him, bent over and held him, his head in his arms. As I think of it now, the beauty of it is unimaginable. It was as if they were best friends. He immediately knew who Eruch was, and he loved him out of the box. I don't know if Matthew remembers this now. It's 33 years ago almost, but I remember it. It's one of the precious memories of my life.
Hey, Alan, it's we're kind of getting a little bit late, for us, not you guys on the East Coast, but us on the West Coast, and we'll be able to get you, some other time too. So, make sure you kind of, go through your Rolodex of mandali, and we'll get you another time.
I got 1,000 stories, Jeff.
Yeah, well, we're all ears for the mandali stories.
You got him there for Mehera's last birthday play,
Yeah, we were.
Yeah.
We were.
December 88.
Yeah, that's right. You were there.
Rainey, do you have a fine a reading at all? Any or a little bit of Francis before we have a few moments of silence? Anything handy there?
Let me just say thank you, Jeff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Before Rainey goes, I just want to thank Rainey for her company here, obviously, and all those who showed up. I know it's late on the East Coast, and I appreciate anybody not in our time zone staying up to 11:30, and I'm very touched by it. I'm very grateful to Jeff. When we were in Myrtle Beach, he asked me to do this, and as I said to him, I got 1,000 stories. I'm happy to talk anytime, old lawyer that I am. So anyway, I just want to say happy Thanksgiving to each and every one of you. Yeah.
Oh, Baba face, you got a beautiful Baba face. No one could ever take your place. Baba face, my poor heart is stopping. You sure has got some more Baba face. I'm up in heaven, I'm in your fond embrace. I didn't need a shove to fall in love with your beautiful Baba face.
Woo!
That's what I was going to say, but I forgot.
Fantastic.
The great
Thank
David
you,
Loman.
Dave.
Dr.
Well-
Roseanne, how are you?
Rainey, have you got something there?
I just oracled the good book,
Okay.
and the good book came up with Ghazal 47. And it's very interesting because the last couplet is that the Baba lovers are ever at the beloved's feet, and we spring up as we fall, and springing, singing like giant flowers, we shed perfume on all. And that's what Alan did tonight. He shed perfume on us all, and by thinking of all these Baba lovers all the time, he's thinking of Baba. So I'll read it.
Yeah, beautiful.
Water, by being in love with death, gives life to all things. Desiring absorption in the ocean, it flows and it sings. The song of water is reflected in greenness. It assumes incredible tallness in men's hearts where it perfectly blooms. Or it assumes incredible tallness in mankind's heart, where it perfectly blooms. It is so docile it goes wherever you conduct it. It's so raging that it sweeps aside all that would obstruct it. Water's nature is female and it flows in curves. Try to grasp it, it eludes you, but respect it and it serves. It occupies the smallest place, yet it spreads everywhere. but its boundlessness can only be expressed in a tear. As water are the lovers of God, tall in humility, forever passing away in eternal stability. We're falling ever at the beloved's feet, and we spring up in that fall, and springing, singing, like giant flowers, we spread perfume and shed perfume on all.
Beautiful. Yeah, let's have a few moments of silence. Jai Baba. Alan, thank you so much. You was all very vivid. It was great to hear more about Joseph Harb. Very few people know much about him at all, and you really brought him to life and all the various mandali. No, they're just such perfect examples of how to live for Baba, right down here at the normal, natural level. So, you get to kind of go to bed early tonight.
I do. No. I got a couple basketball games to watch.
Yeah. Oh. Well,
Jai Baba. Thanks so
and
much.
Thanks.
and just let's kind of give a few moments to Danny. Just they're a beautiful couple, and boy, what do you have to go through? With your near and dear ones. Ram Nori.
Jai Meher Baba.
Well, we got Nasreen here to Nasreen is the one who is the bouncer. She clears the tavern.
She's here.
Is she here? Yeah.
Okay. Not the bouncer. She's the linger no longer person.
Linger, yeah.
You ready?
Yes.
Avatar Meher Baba ki jai. Avatar
Meher Baba ki jai.
Avatar
Meher
Baba ki jai.
Avatar Meher Baba ki jai.
Gotta have that voice.
Army of
Okay, well,
Yes.
have a good Thanksgiving, everybody.
Jai Baba.
That
Yes,
tofu turkey and whatever you have.
We're thankful for you, Jeff Wolverton.
Yeah.
Thank you, Alan. That was
Thank you.
really lovely.
Indeed.
Alan, thank you so much.
Thank
you, Alan.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Enjoyed it.
Alan, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Marvin and Michelle, it doesn't get better.
Hey, Alan. Love to you and Karen.
Much love to you too.
Jai Baba.
I appreciate your Facebook.
Oh, I try to keep it. He takes all the flack.
I knows all the flack, but that's another issue.
To Baba to the work.
Yeah.
Hey, wait, Marvin. Hey, what? You got to hear this, Alan. Marvin, how about telling the story of the time when you kind of were first in India, wandering around up on the hill there? You got to hear this.
You mean when the car came?
No, no, no.
Yeah, yeah, that.
Yes, the car.
Don't give away the punchline.
No.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so what happened was I was brand new to Baba. Didn't know really where I was. I just assumed that I had come to God's home, and somehow I was trying to figure out how I was going to fit in, and I had lost all my clothes, and I had to walk into Ahmednagar to try to get some underwear and things like that. And so I got back, and I walked the whole way because I didn't know how to take a bus. I didn't know how to take a rickshaw or anything. And so walking back, I'm looking at all these tombs and from all the saints, and wondering where do I fit in, and what is this? Why is this whole place for Meher Baba? I mean, who is he? I didn't really know. And so I got to the Samadhi, and I walked up, and it was deserted, completely deserted, and there was just Nanakare. And immediately when I came in, I went into the tomb, and I sat there, and Nanakare gave me some prasad when I came out. And then I sat there and was lost in thought. And Nanakare comes up to me and he says, I have something that I have to do. And would you mind to watch the tomb? So I said, okay, sure, I'll watch the tomb. What do I do? And he says, well, somebody comes, you just give them some prasad. And I said, well, okay, I didn't get to ask him how many or what, and he ran off. And so
Didn't he say
He ran off anywhere.
Didn't he say to say welcome home too?
No, he never said anything to me.
Okay. Yeah.
And so, I'm standing there, and all of a sudden, it must have been 5-10 seconds later, the blue car pulls up with 5 women. I didn't know who they were. I didn't know that there was Mani, Nehru, Katie, Goher. I didn't know who these people were. They get out of the car. They double park right in front of right on the side of the Samadhi and just run in, And I'm going, okay, 2 or 3, and finally I decided I'd give them 3 so they wouldn't think I was so stingy. And Mani comes out first, and I put some prasad in her hand, and all I could think of was the booklet that I had read in Chicago that said, welcome home. And I gave her a big hug, and I said, welcome home. And she burst out laughing and turned around and said, do you believe this, pilgrim?
What?
And then they all came out, and I gave them all prasad. And of course, then I found out who they were.
But imagine saying welcome home to Mani and Goer and Mehru and all that. That was a avataric setup.
So Marvin, some of the people in the gallery may not know who they are, so you want to say who they are.
Well, it was Mani.
It was Baba's sister.
Baba's sister.
You didn't know who these women were.
I had no idea who they were. All I know is they came up in a car, and it was my job, to make sure they didn't mess up the tomb or something. I didn't know what to do.
Yeah. Well, beautiful.
So gorgeous.
And who,
Anyway.
then who was Mani?
Huh?
Who was Mani?
Mani was Baba's sister. In Meru.
Yeah, you didn't know it.
No.
How did you figure it out? I mean, how did it all come to
Oh, I didn't.
bear in your mind?
I didn't know
it
it
presented to you. Did it?
I knew when I first made the first trip to Merazov in the bus, but before that I didn't.
Much later.
I think
you figured it out much.
Yeah.
You didn't ever figure it out at the tomb at the moment. Excuse me.
Marvin,
Go ahead,
I think.
Marvin, I'm sorry.
Marvin, I think that you mentioned that they were still kind of laughing in the car, right?
Oh
As they
yeah,
took off.
just cackling and just.
Okay, well, anyway, that'll send us off for Thanksgiving. That's welcome home.
Happy Thanksgiving. Happy
Yeah.
Thanksgiving.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving. Jai Baba. Jai Baba.
Happy Thanksgiving. Jai Baba.
Baba. Jai Baba. Jai Baba. Baba.
Baba.
Baba KJ.
Jai